Hi everyone, welcome to day 3. Today is day 3. You've made it to day 3. You've done really well so far. Congratulations. So I'd love to get some feedback on how everything's going. So if you get a chance, pop a note in the Facebook group. If you're not in the Facebook group and you have Facebook, join the Facebook group. It's under Longevity Chiropractic, and then there's 10 days to renew, so you can pop into there. Let me know how things are going. Let me know what's working, what's not working, what's been useful for you, which stretch or exercise was really useful yesterday. Today we're going to talk about diet. We're also going to talk about breath work. So I want you to think about something with me here. How long do you want to live? Do you want to live to be 100? Do you want to live to be 85? Do you want to live to be 120? And I know the typical response here is, well, it all depends on how I feel. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at, if you want to live to be 100, how do you want to feel from 90 to 100? What do you want to be able to do? There's a real kind of, as I'm sure there is for most of us, a real variety of ages of my relatives at when they've passed. My grandma, however, lived to be 104. And her last decade, from 90 to 100, she lived downtown Toronto, she walked around High Park every day. So it was a good 2.5 kilometer walk. She did that every day. And I look at that and I think, okay, what do I need to be able to do so what do I need to do now to be able to do that in my last decade of life? Assuming, again, it would be from 90 to 100. That would be ideal. During that time, I want to be as vital and as vibrant as possible, just like my grandmother. So there's things similar to retirement planning. There's things we need to do now so that we can then have that quality of life at that point. So if you work with anyone in terms of like planning out your retirement, you've done this. You've gone, all right, the end point is X. How do I plan for that now? So this is what we're doing with health. We're looking at the end point is X, 100, 90, 80, whatever it is. How do we plan for that now? And so there's various things that we need to be able to do now. One of the most important things, and we're going to get to this, is you need to be able to have a certain cardiovascular fitness, and you also need to be able to have a certain ability to move weight. So those are two things that are coming up in the next little bit, but those are imperative. The other thing you need to be able to do is you need to be able to utilize the food that comes into your body to extract from it all the nutrients and minerals and essential everything that you need from that food in order for your body to continue to thrive. And your body's constantly, we talked about this yesterday, your cells are constantly repairing themselves and regenerating. You need to do that in the healthiest version possible, right? Again, the choices that we make now, whether it's 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever it is, are going to determine what that last decade looks like. So today we're going to talk about food and nutrition, and this is something that is incredibly confusing for people. And I know in the 20 years that I've been talking about food and nutrition, the conversation that I have had with people has changed. It's changed based on the research. So there was a period of time, not too long ago, where I really advocated for much more of a Paleolithic lifestyle. And I don't think that's wrong. However, the research has changed. And so in order to stay as kind of current and kind of relevant as possible, we have to change based on the research. So the research now is not necessarily saying that, you know, to eat more of like a Paleolithic way is wrong, or for some people there's varieties of the ketogenic diet that work very well and are actually quite good for them. You need to know some certain things about yourself in order to do that. And if you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me or to your naturopath or your dietitian or whoever you work with, just to make sure that if you're planning on using a ketogenic diet, you know certain things about your blood lipids and your cholesterol markers and your family history with that. So that is an aside. Where the research really has gone lately, and I don't think this will surprise any of you, is to more of a plant-based focused. So we are still definitely focusing on protein, but we're focusing more, or the research seems to suggest that we should be focusing more now on plant-based, fiber-forward eating. The food plan that has been probably the most researched, or I shouldn't even call it a food plan, the style of eating that has been the most researched over the years and has had the most positive outcome is the Mediterranean diet. there is a current blending of that Mediterranean diet with much more of a plant-based way of eating. And from that, that's where a lot of the current research is going. And a lot of this research is based on people like Dan Buettner and the Blue Zones. It's based on people like David Sinclair, does a lot of research in terms of longevity, also focuses on a plant-forward eating. So there's a lot of people that are now all saying the same thing, which is different because for a long time there was a lot of people saying a lot of different things and a lot of kind of like infighting. And for the amount of research that I do on this, which I don't want for a minute for you to think that I sit every day and just pour over food research and nutrition research, but I do kind of always have a little bit of a brain cell on it. It really seems to be that currently this is where we're going. So hence why this year's 10 Days to Renew is more plant focused. There is still chicken and fish in this diet. Intentionally, we have excluded red meat. We talked about that. But that, if you want to try the 10 days, as we've said, fully plant-based, there's options in there for that as you go through the whole time. Depending on where you are in, especially if you're female, depending on where you are in menopause, perimenopause, pregnancy, all of those things, your protein requirements may be easier. And there are ways to get good, clean protein that is animal-based, that doesn't appear to have a negative effect on our health at this point. If you are eating meat 24/7, I know some people, the carnivore diet might disagree with me, but there does seem to be ample research that that is not the best way to go and that eating plant-based is much better. So there's my little soapbox there for why it is that we have gone the way that we have this year with 10 days, because the research is really driving in this direction. And I think for a lot of us too, there's also the environmental component to that, right? In terms of really reducing our impact, the more focused we are in plants, there is, again, ample research to suggest that that's going to be less impactful on the environment. So, having said that, there is a period of time for some people where if you're not used to eating a lot of lentils and kind of beans, you may have a period where it's uncomfortable. So if you have experienced that, typically that does pass. And you can certainly, as much as I don't obviously advocate Dr. Google, you can certainly Google, like, switching to plant-based diet. What should I expect in terms of my GI system? But the bacteria that exists when we eat mostly plants is different than the bacteria of the standard American diet. There is a switching period that occurs there where our body becomes more able to digest those plants and legumes and all those things, and sometimes that can cause some gas and bloating. Again, as with everything, there are people that this does not fit. So I know personally a number of people who have tried to incorporate more beans and legumes into their diet, and they simply cannot do that. And that could be for a variety of reasons. One could be that these little phytates and lectins that are on these things irritate their gut lining. In that case, obviously don't do that. Focus on really good quality protein and then getting as much plant material in there with that as you can. There is a suggestion for sure that we want to shoot for 30 different plants, fruits and veg every week. So different ones. Again, it affects our gut biome differently. And when we're looking at diet and nutrition, that's what matters, is what is happening in the gut biome. How are we able to utilize the nutrition that we're eating? How are we able to extract the nutrients from what we're eating? Those are like the paramount, most important things. So that's really, again, in a 9-minute nutshell, why 10 days this year has gone the way it has. So let's go over some other fundamentals in terms of diet, and then also what happens when you're done the 10 days, okay? So again, sorry, I apologize. I do have notes again, so I'm going to look down a little bit. My apologies. Diets rich in fruit, veg, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes are consistently linked to longevity. Those whole grains do not have to be gluten-containing grains. There are tons of great grains that are not gluten-containing. Amaranth, millet, quinoa, sorghum. There's all kinds of alternatives for that, especially if you feel at the end of the 10 days that eliminating gluten has been helpful to you. don't feel that that means that you then have to eliminate making, for instance, pancakes, right? We've got the almond flour pancakes. There's a lot of alternatives there. Healthy fats are really, really, really important. There was, for any of you that, were alive during the 80s and 90s, we vilified fats. We hated fats, but now we realize how damaging that was to us. Dietary cholesterol intake is not as important in terms of overall cholesterol presentation as we thought it was. There seems to be, certainly genetics plays a big link there. It has more of an effect on fatty acids in the blood than necessarily cholesterol exactly. Now, I'm not going to tell you to go out and start eating bacon all the time, but don't worry about having avocados, about having eggs, about having those things, and avocados aren't one of them, but having eggs and having those things that have slightly higher cholesterol levels in them, because again, it does not appear through the research that that is going to have an impact on your overall blood cholesterol. There's other things that are more impactful on that than dietary cholesterol. But fat is incredibly important. Omega-3 fats are incredibly important. It's very rare that I meet someone, and in fact, we really can't, because our sea life has become too toxic. We really can't get the level of omega-3 we need just from a dietary standpoint. We should be supplementing with that, and we should be supplementing with a really good quality, not a Shoppers Drug Mart. Sorry, shoppers, get a really good quality. We sell them, Stone Store, New Age, lots of people sell them, your naturopath. Get a good quality omega-3, and it needs to come from small water cooled fish. They don't have as much opportunity to accumulate toxins in them. If you are vegan, there are great options for, I think it's more like a seaweed based. Goodness Me, I know Goodness Me has a really good vegan option for omega-3s. Your EPA is what matters. You want your EPA levels to be, it's different for everyone, somewhere from 1,000 to 3,000 a day. And the DHA is great, but that's not what we care about. What we care about is making sure your EPA levels are high enough. And then making sure you're getting really good food-based fat. So again, your avocado, your eggs, your olive oil, those things are incredibly important. Coconut oil, a little bit more sparingly than some of those other things. And if you're concerned about olive oil at all, I have done a lot of research on olive oil. There is no research that supports that using olive oil at a moderate level will increase weight, like overall body weight. In fact, the list of things that olive oil is linked to in terms of our longevity and our overall health is so kind of incredible. Like when you look at all the things that olive oil can help with, that it is something that every day we should be consuming. You don't want to cook with it at a high temperature. You do want to sprinkle a little bit on your broccoli when you take it out of the steamer or that way. You can cook with it, but it just needs to be a little bit lower temperature. Otherwise it just burns and then it oxidizes. Okay, so we talked about moderate protein consumption. Definitely do on moderate protein. And again, this is something that if any of you are in that stage of menopause or perimenopause, you're going to meet Dr. Janine in the next few days, but she is incredibly well-versed when it comes to this. And I think she'll go over this in more detail with us as well. She's a wonderful resource. But in terms of that is a time where your protein requirements do go up a little bit. The ranges can vary from 25 grams up per meal. On average, it's somewhere between 25 to 30 grams is what you're shooting for per meal, which can feel daunting, but there's lots of ways that you can get that. And if this is something you're struggling with, reach out and we can certainly chat more about how to get more really good quality protein into your diet. And then obviously minimize processed food, right? So here's the thing, right? I came home, many nights I come home at 6 o'clock and I haven't, maybe, before 10 days, I hadn't food prepped as much as I'd wanted to. And it's so easy to just be like, guys, just go get a pizza or just go get a hamburger. I don't think I fully understood until I was a single, solo parent with kids and a job, how difficult it is at the end of the day to pull together a meal for a lot of people. It doesn't mean that you don't want to, right? It doesn't mean that it's not the highest priority that you have, but sometimes you're just freaking exhausted. And the idea of making up a really nice, lentil soup or stew or whatever it is just, it's exhausting. So this is one of these areas where if you, and I've found this more and more too, a lot of times with food prep, if you have a very busy life like that and you're waiting till the end of the day to make that happen, you're not setting yourself up for failure, but you're more likely that you're going to go back to using those processed foods than not. Other times you're going to use processed foods is when you're on the run and you're hungry and you don't have apples and walnuts in your bag with you. The way to avoid processed food is to plan. It is essential that you plan in order to stay away from processed foods. And there really just is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's a recent article that came out, and I can't remember where the article was. It might have been CBC. I will look for it if any of you want to reference it. But looking at the biome, the gut biome of people that live in major cities, and how that gut biome is changing to the point that they cannot digest plants as well as we should be able to as humans. And it's this processed food that is leading to that, right? The biome is changing to be able now to accommodate just that processed food and not able to tolerate plant as well as we should be able to, right? This is like, the implications of this are massive. But again, avoiding processed food, I know it seems like a no-brainer, but it is something that is incredibly important in terms of us reaching that last decade of our life. We will not have the quality and quantity of life if we are consuming processed foods on a regular basis versus if we are consuming home cooked, good, whole food meals on a regular basis. There's just really no comparison. Antioxidant rich foods. So again, shooting for 30 different fruits and veg per week. Hydration, super important. So I'm just going to put on I'm cognizant of time again. I'm just going to put on my chiropractor hat here for a minute. I see a huge number of people that come in chronic pain, and that chronic pain is very, very often from the low back. So whether it's a disc issue or a side joint issue, or there's a whole bunch of things. Very commonly, it has to do with a disc. So one of the things that happens when we are not properly hydrated is we quite literally start to shrivel up a little bit inside, right? So where this matters in terms of people dealing with chronic pain is those tissues. So if you imagine a disc, it looks just kind of like a donut, right? It's this flat little structure, and then inside you've got the jelly. If you're not hydrated enough, it's like a sponge. It just dries right up. It needs to stay hydrated in order for it to stay healthy. And there is research to support the fact that if a disc is more dehydrated, number one, it has a harder time bringing in all the nutrients it needs. And number two, it will degenerate faster. That is not something that we want. Again, from our 80th to 90th year, or 90th to 100 year, whatever it is, we want our back to stay as healthy and as kind of vital and mobile as possible and feeling good. And just in general with chronic pain, being hydrated is incredibly important. The other thing is, a lot of the times when we're hungry, we're actually thirsty. This just is, and it's something just to test on yourself, right? So if you've just had breakfast and it's, been an hour and a half and you're like, oh, I'm so hungry, drink 2 glasses of water first and see what happens. If you're still hungry, then eat. But if you're like, oh, I really was thirsty, then 2 to 3 liters of water a day is what most of us should be shooting for. Again, you want to stop it by about 4 o'clock if possible. And it's just, I cannot explain how important this is. In fact, when I go over a new patient intake with patients and they're coming in and we're sitting down, I say to people, look, chiropractic is not a silver bullet. There's things you have to do on your end. And number one is you got to drink water. You got to stay hydrated. So as we go through 10 days, I know you're all doing this, so I'm preaching to the choir, but just keep that in mind. There's an incredible amount of importance as to why we do that. And then in summary, just really adopting a nutrient dense. You're focusing on how do I create a state in my body where A, it's not toxic, I'm not putting toxic things into it, and it's not deficient in anything, right? So I'm getting what I need from my food. I'm getting what I need to live this healthy, vital, vibrant life. So any questions, please, 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 please don't hesitate to reach out. I could talk about food all day. I love this conversation. So if you want to talk more, I'm here. Drink your water, eat your fruit, eat your veg, have fun, be creative, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.